Mohammed told us he was driving about 80 miles per hour when he tried to merge into the middle lane to pass a car in front of him. His Tesla began to hydroplane when he drove through some standing water. His Tesla fishtailed and spun 180 degrees before he effectively backed into a semi-truck in the right lane while still going about 80 miles per hour. Neither Mohammed nor the semi-truck driver were harmed in the collision. We're guessing the trucker barely felt the impact, but he still pulled over and stopped. The California Highway Patrol responded to the scene and wrote a report which Mohammed was able to include in his insurance claim. His Model 3 was deemed a total loss by his insurance provider after the repair quote came to $33,000 US, so they wrote him a check for the value of a new car. This submitter was heading home in Phoenix, Arizona, with another Tesla following behind him. Traffic was piling up, and when he got into the left turn lane, the other Tesla driver did the same. Traffic piled up in the intersection, so when the light finally turned green, our submitter wasn't able to take his left turn. The driver of the Tesla behind him got frustrated and started gesturing to him that he should turn. Eventually, he just decided to take off. Too bad there was a cop right next to him who immediately lit up his party lights and pulled him over. Roll the jingle.
That Tesla man can't drive. That Tesla man can't drive. That Tesla man.
Nick was stopped next to a Camaro at a red light in El Dorado Hills, California. When the light turned green, they both took off in what Nick calls a friendly, spirited race. At least it was for Nick. The Camaro driver lost the race and became furious, and to Nick's surprise, he turned into a stalking road rager. Nick thinks he couldn't handle being beaten by an EV. The Camaro driver used the turn lane in an attempt to pass Nick, and when he finally did, he brake-checked Nick before driving painfully slowly. At the next intersection, the road opened up into multiple lanes, so Nick moved into the middle lane, then abruptly to the turn lane to escape the Camaro. It seemed like his strategy had worked. Then a few seconds later, the Camaro came back and stopped right next to Nick's Tesla. Nick turned around and the Camaro driver sped off, crossing the double yellow line and illegally passing several cars. The individual proceeded to follow Nick, then parked one block over at a shop owned by one of Nick's friends. Nick adds that racing is never safe, but that other driver turned a calculated, open-lane 0 to 60 race into a very dangerous incident. Don't be like this guy. Oliver was driving his Model 3 on the highway in Spring, Texas. He was behind a landscaping truck that lost a ladder when it was cut off by an SUV. Oliver reacted quickly and was able to avoid the ladder. He told us even though the truck driver was cut off, the ladder still should have been better secured. Nobody stopped and the truck left, so Oliver called the landscaping company to let them know about their lost ladder. Apparently, they couldn't care less about it. Another Oliver experienced the same thing in the same week, but on the other side of the planet in New Zealand. I guess poorly secured objects are a worldwide problem. This Oliver was driving his Model 3 behind a Toyota Land Cruiser when a big piece of plywood detached from its roof. It stayed aloft for a while, so Oliver just kept watching it fly and tried to predict where it would come down. At the last second, he swerved to the other lane to avoid it. Evidently, the Toyota driver noticed something was off because he started braking before the plywood was even airborne. Oliver was very lucky. That could have ended up a lot worse, as we've seen in previous episodes. David was driving his Model 3 Performance in Antelope, California when he found himself next to a new electric BMW. Both drivers looked at each other before giving each other the race nod. David told us he was impressed with the BMW keeping up with him at first, and he was surprised by its acceleration. As Rusty crested a blind hill, he immediately noticed that traffic had backed up right behind it. Rusty gently applied his brakes to stop in time and give the drivers behind him time to stop as well. But this wasn't enough to prevent the reckless drivers of a VW and a Ford SUV from zooming over the hill. The VW driver was unable to stop in time and swerved off the road and into the woods, colliding with the tree. Reacting quickly, Rusty moved his car toward the center line to give them more space, narrowly avoiding contact with the VW. Despite the collision, the driver of the VW managed to continue driving, albeit with a visibly damaged passenger side wheel and suspension, burning rubber as they made their way to the next street to pull off. Maurice was driving his Model X with autopilot engaged on an Italian highway when the driver in front of him braked hard to avoid rear-ending another vehicle. Maurice told us the Tesla activated the automatic emergency braking and merged to the right to avoid a collision. Maurice said everything happened very quickly. He thinks it's amazing the car decided to merge to the right lane and take advantage of a space between vehicles. Maurice sent along a thank you for Tesla. His passengers were left with a scare, but their thankful autopilot spared them from a collision. This emitter was driving his Model 3 one rainy night in Pleasanton, California when he hit some standing water while going a little too fast. He hydroplaned, spun 180 degrees, and collided with the center barrier. The impact ripped off the front part of the lower rocker cover on the left side of the vehicle. 3 of the 4 wheel covers came off, and the back right wheel's sidewall hit the curb after the 180-degree spin. Thankfully, there was nobody behind him when this happened. The damage could have been much worse. He also spotted another wrecked car being transported by a tow truck on the other side of the highway. So he's guessing he wasn't the first one to make this mistake. After he got turned around and pulled into a parking lot, he was able to reattach the rest of the rocker cover. His total repair bill came to $180 for new wheel covers and $10 for some clips. Bruce had stopped at a red light when, you know what, let's just roll the jingle.
You've been Honda bumped.
Yeah, you guessed it, it was a Honda bump, and sadly, Bruce told us it looked like the Honda might have been uninsured as it was missing a front license plate. Police were called to the scene, and Bruce sent this video to us right then and there. This might be the freshest submission we've ever received. Bruce sent a shout out for his daughter Gemma for being strong during the incident. Remember Family Cruisin', the guy who got his butt kicked while drag racing against a minivan? Well, he got his butt kicked again, this time by Tesla Autopilot. He was at his grandma's nursing home in Naperville, Illinois, when he used Smart Summon to call the car to come pick them up at the front door. He'd used it on over 50 previous occasions in this exact location without any issues. This, however, was the first time he'd used it after the new 2022.45.15 software update which had been installed the day before. As they waited for his Tesla to come pick them up, it made an abrupt right turn and hit a brick barrier. He told us he took his finger off Smart Summon at about the time he saw it head for the curb, but it didn't react in time. His repair estimate is $996 US. Ada was on his way home after picking up some food. He was making a right turn when all of a sudden he heard the sound of a huge impact. Ada made a U-turn and checked on the first person that he came across. Surprisingly, nobody suffered any actual injuries and everyone walked away from the collision. Cops responded to the scene quickly, and when Ada showed one of the officers his Teslacam video, he mentioned how convenient it is whenever cars have built-in dash cams. While Dean was inside Shooter's world, he got a phone notification that his Sentry Mode alarm had been triggered. He ran outside to find his alarm going off and 2 victims claiming they'd been robbed of their gun bags. Dean offered to check and see if Sentry Mode had recorded the robbery. Surprisingly, the suspect had parked right next to his car, giving it a perfect view of everything that had happened. The police were called and Dean handed them the video evidence. They also collected the criminal's fingerprints that were found on his car. This emitter was driving his Model 3 in San Gabriel, California. While he was stopped at a red light, a Chevy Malibu started creeping up on him and getting uncomfortably close. This emitter inched forward, but the Chevy driver pulled up even closer. When the light turned green, the Chevy driver started driving recklessly in an attempt to get ahead of this emitter. Once he had the opportunity, he cut the emitter off and brake checked him. The submitter wasn't having it, so he hit the juice pedal and zoomed around the Chevy driver, who struggled to keep up. Eventually, the Chevy driver backed off. Mitch was driving on Highway 85 in San Jose when he had to avoid a car stopped in the middle of the highway. If you're wondering why the driver had stopped, a mother duck and her ducklings were waddling across the highway. Obviously, stopping on the highway is dangerous, but on the other hand, nobody wants to run over a family of ducks. Let us know in a comment what you think people should do in this situation. Gregorin was driving home from getting some late-night Vietnamese coffee, and while merging onto the highway, he encountered a ghost truck. Gregorin was using autopilot, and it brought the car to a safe stop rather than hitting the truck. He then took control and drove around it. Gregorin got out and looked in the truck but didn't see anybody. I don't know about you, but I'm getting goosebumps. Gregorin called 911 before leaving the Ghostbusters scene. I mean, the accident. John was driving north on Route 231 just north of Huntsville, Alabama. It was a foggy morning when he suddenly encountered a wrong-way driver headed south in the northbound lanes. John called 911 to report a driver going the wrong way in the fog, and they informed him that there was no fog in the region that morning. Just kidding. They didn't say that, but wouldn't that have been a better story? Actually, John never heard back from them. Vidal was coming down from West Palm toward Miami on I-95 when traffic was slowing down for a previous collision. Vidal was driving with autopilot engaged. When the school bus behind him changed lanes, the driver of an Audi didn't notice the slowdown and slammed directly into Vidal's Tesla. There were no tire marks or screeching leading up to the impact, so Vidal doesn't think the driver even touched the brakes. Vidal had left space ahead of him, and autopilot automatically applied the brakes, so he only inched forward. Immediately before the collision, he felt the seatbelts tighten, and for a split second he wondered why that had happened. When speaking with the police, they initially blamed Vidal for causing the accident by suddenly stopping, but they changed their minds after he showed them his Teslacam footage. Between waiting on replacement parts and repairs, it took 3 months to repair the damage. In total, the repair bill reached $10,000 after replacing the rear bumper, the rear hatch, and several other miscellaneous parts. Vidal sent us one more story. Sadly, he lost the original files, so this one is just a phone recording. In this one, he slowly approached and stopped at a red light. A couple of seconds later, a turning driver didn't yield to traffic and collided with his Tesla. Both lights were turning red at the time, and the van driver was found at fault for the collision. Repairing Vidal's car cost $1,800. Gregory was using FSD when he noticed the car was decelerating. He realized the car in front of him was slowing down, so he applied the brakes to slow down even more. When he looked in the rearview mirror, he saw the car behind him stop. Somewhere behind him, the driver of a pickup truck went off the road to avoid rear-ending traffic. Right after that, a semi-truck pulling an empty vehicle trailer went way off the road to avoid both the stopped traffic and the pickup. It actually ended up going into a shallow swamp in the median. Speaking of shallow swamps, check out our new Patreon campaign. We're posting daily behind-the-scenes content, and we've even started an exclusive series of Patreon stories similar to the old-school videos we used to make 3 years ago. Come hang out and join the fun. We promise, it's much better than getting stuck in a shallow swamp.
Man, we got a Patreon, man. Please support the show.